It happened in a small coastal village in northern Denmark, a place where winter nights seem to stretch longer than usual and where silence rules every street as soon as evening falls. There lived a 6-year-old boy who, without anyone noticing at first, had turned his bedroom into a kind of improvised auditory observatory. He was not looking at the sky or searching for strange lights. He was devoted to something far more unusual, listening to the void. While other children played with dolls or built towers out of colored blocks, he preferred to sit in front of a small radio receiver he had found among his grandfather's old things. Every evening he turned on the device and swept through the spectrum with slow, almost methodical movements, as if following a routine no one had ever taught him. The constant hiss of static accompanied the family well into the night, a faint murmur that had become part of the household without the parents realizing it. What was strange was the boy's concentration. He sat motionless, head slightly tilted, as though analyzing every interference. He did not seem bored or confused. This was not an improvised game. It was a search. From time to time, he jotted something down in a small notebook with short strokes that formed simple yet orderly graphs figures that did not resemble typical children's drawings. Occasionally, he even marked the hours, as if recording an event only he could detect. As the days passed, his father began to notice details he did not know how to interpret. The boy did not look out the window or ask about the comet that kept appearing in the news. 3 Atlas seemed to interest him not at all, yet every time the television mentioned its approach, he briefly raised his head, as if mentally comparing what he heard with something he already knew. It was during that period that his obsession took on a more disturbing tone. He began abruptly changing frequencies, as if he had detected an exact point where the sound deformed slightly. He would stop there, listen in silence, then draw a small peak in his notebook, always with the same focused gesture. He explained nothing. He showed no emotion, but he gave the impression that he recognized a pattern no one else perceived. His parents thought it was a peculiar phase, a passing curiosity perhaps fed by some documentary he had seen without their noticing. But the constancy with which he repeated the routine began to unsettle them. Every single night, without fail, he returned to sweeping the spectrum as though afraid of missing something essential. And every morning, his notebooks revealed new marks, new recordings, and comparisons made with a precision inexplicable for a child his age. Despite everything, there were no signs of stress or pathological obsession. He continued to behave with a disconcerting serenity, as if simply carrying out a silent task that no one else knew about. The only truly anomalous thing was his reaction when he found a sound that caught his attention. He would close his eyes for a few seconds and remain perfectly still, as if trying to decipher something hidden within the noise. For weeks, the family lived alongside this routine without understanding what was happening. They did not know that his persistence was not random. They did not know that the boy believed he was hearing something real, something that was neither interference nor atmospheric noise. And they could not imagine that all those solitary efforts would end in a discovery no adult was prepared to face. Because very soon that boy would claim that 3 Atlas accelerated right after it had responded to a human message. Yet one key piece was still missing for that statement to make sense. The boy's behavior began to intensify as the days went by. His nightly routine, previously quiet and almost harmless, started to display a precision that unsettled anyone who watched closely. The changes were small, but constant. Some nights he swept the spectrum calmly. Others he stopped dead on a specific frequency, as if he had been waiting for exactly that sound. One windy afternoon, while the family went about their ordinary tasks, he decided to turn on the receiver much earlier than usual. He sat in front of the device without a word and began turning the tuning knob with tense, almost calculated movements, as if the need to record something were stronger than anything else. The sound coming from the speaker was the usual one: white noise, intermittent pulses, and brief flashes of distant voices that had nothing to do with what he was seeking. Yet at one very precise moment, the static changed. It lasted only a second, a tiny frequency jump that would have gone completely unnoticed by an adult. But that meant something important to him. He leaned forward with an almost instinctive reaction, as if he had recognized a familiar pattern. His hands moved quickly. He took a pencil, opened his notebook, and drew a series of lines with absolute certainty. An abrupt peak, a short plateau, and a uniform descent that he rendered with astonishing accuracy for his age. When he finished, he set the pencil down and continued listening with such fixed attention that it seemed he was waiting for a second event, an echo or confirmation that never came during the rest of the afternoon. In the following days, his attitude changed noticeably. He interrupted activities to review his notebooks, compared pages, and marked minute differences that only he seemed to understand. He explained nothing, but his restlessness was evident. Every time the television mentioned transmission experiments or radio communication tests, he looked up for a few seconds and returned to his notes, as if verifying information he already possessed. That was when his recordings began to reveal a concrete sequence. The boy had placed two curves side by side. The first corresponded to a faint sound recorded days earlier. The second to the abrupt peak captured that afternoon. Between them, there was a clear difference in intensity and shape, highlighted with straight lines and small time annotations. The separation between the two moments was not accidental. It had been drawn with the intention of showing that something had changed between one point in time and the next. That difference coincided with a detail the parents only learned later. A European agency had sent a routine transmission into deep space, a minor experiment that received little media attention. The boy knew nothing about it, yet his record showed what appeared to be an immediate reaction to that transmission. That precise and highly improbable coincidence led the family to suspect that the captured signal was neither atmospheric noise nor terrestrial interference, but something more complex that occurred right after the official broadcast. From that moment on, the boy continued listening every night with the same methodical precision, but he was no longer searching for random variations. He checked specific frequencies, noted prolonged silences, and compared intervals with a discipline that did not seem to belong to his age. What he had captured was not, for him, an isolated phenomenon. He treated it as the first step of something larger, as if convinced that this particular peak was part of an ongoing exchange that still had to unfold. Although he did not express it, his demeanor conveyed the impression that he was expecting a new change in the spectrum, and that his simple receiver, however basic, would allow him to detect it before anyone else. As the days passed, the accumulation of recordings in the boy's notebooks began to acquire a weight impossible to ignore. The graphs were no longer simple, isolated peaks or scattered sound variations. They formed a linear, organized sequence, almost as if describing a process advancing step by step. Although he offered no explanations, his annotations displayed a disturbing clarity. He indicated exact times, compared intensities, and marked specific moments when the signal seemed to undergo micro-alterations that no one else had detected. The parents, still not grasping the magnitude of what they were seeing, began to keep each notebook more carefully than usual. The pages showed an evolution too coherent to attribute to childish imagination. The way the boy measured distances between one peak and another, or the precision with which he drew parallel lines, indicated that he was following a pattern he could not have invented without an external reference. That precision caught the attention of a close relative who worked at a small radio astronomy observation center in Copenhagen. Out of simple curiosity, he asked to examine some of the graphs. When he received photos of several pages, his reaction was immediate. He could not understand why a child had produced patterns so similar to those that had appeared in certain instrumental readings recorded by his team weeks earlier. Those weak detections had been classified as unidentified interference and had not been made public. Yet the curves drawn by the boy matched in shape and rhythm the sequence known to only a handful of specialists. Intrigued, he decided to visit the house to see if there was a simple explanation. Seeing the notebooks in person, he noticed something the photos did not fully reveal. The marks were uncorrected. There were no erased lines or signs of prior attempts. The boy drew the curves in a single motion, with certainty, as if he knew the final result before tracing the first line. That detail left him perplexed, a feeling that eventually turned into concern. While examining the recordings, he noticed an apparently insignificant annotation on one of the pages. It was a time repeated several times, an hour the boy had highlighted on different days as if it held special meaning. After comparing it with internal reports, he discovered that the time coincided with test transmissions sent by the European agency during a minor experiment. The boy had detected changes right after those broadcasts, even though no one had mentioned the existence of those tests to him. As the analysis progressed, an even more disturbing pattern emerged. On several pages, the boy left an empty space after each captured signal, as if indicating an interval in which he expected a response. It was neither a creative interpretation nor a way to complete the drawing. It was a repeated element with clear intent. That repetition caught the researcher's attention, and he began rearranging the graphs in the order indicated by the boy. The result was a sequence that seemed to represent an exchange, an initial transmission, a brief silence, and a subsequent alteration retaining the same acoustic signature. The researcher froze before that conclusion. It was evident that the boy had interpreted the signal as a dialogue, or at least as a back-and-forth process. What was disturbing was not only the clarity of the representation, but the apparent anticipation. There were pages where the boy had recorded a variation before European instruments officially documented it. Although such a coincidence might seem accidental, the repetition made chance difficult to sustain. From that moment on, the adults began to watch the boy with a mixture of wonder and unease. His behavior had not changed at all. He remained calm, orderly, and consistent in his nightly routine. But what he was recording could no longer be considered innocent. Each new graph showed a direct continuation of the previous one, as if he were following a silent conversation progressing in the background. It was neither an isolated sound nor random interference. It was a gradual development. The family, unsure how to handle the situation, avoided hasty decisions. The researcher, for his part, recommended leaving everything exactly as it was, so as not to disturb the boy's behavior. He did not know whether there was a rational explanation, but he sensed that interrupting the routine might destroy the possibility of discovering something important. Meanwhile, the graphs continued to pile up. The pages showed more complex curves, more precise variations, and a growing intensity that seemed to increase with each new entry. There was a clear sense of progress, as if the sequence were approaching a decisive point. Most disturbing was the discovery that on several occasions, the boy had marked the end of each graph with a kind of circular sign, a small form that, for him, seemed to indicate closure or confirmation of something only he understood. For the adults, the conclusion became harder and harder to ignore. That highly organized and precise sequence did not appear to describe a random phenomenon. It represented a process, and the boy acted as if he knew that process was not yet finished. The following days were marked by an atmosphere of silent expectation in the house. Although no one spoke of it openly, everyone felt the boy was on the verge of recording something significant. His notebooks, filled with meticulous notes, no longer resembled mere childish curiosities, but fragments of a larger sequence heading toward a specific point. Every night he sat before the receiver with the same habitual calm, yet his posture revealed a deeper concentration than before, as if he knew that what he awaited was very close. The researcher who had analyzed the notebooks continued visiting the house regularly. He examined the new graphs with a mixture of disbelief and concern, for the sequence kept accumulating correlations with technical data that professional instruments had only detected days later. Most striking was that the boy had begun marking a constant interval between signals, as if those variations were part of a repetitive process obeying a precise rhythm. That detail particularly caught the researcher's attention, since it matched an echo pattern some preliminary studies had suggested in connection with 3I Atlas, though without sufficient evidence for official confirmation. As the notes progressed, the boy began repeating a type of curve that did not appear on the early pages. It was an ascending line ending in an abrupt increase, a final point he highlighted with a darker stroke. For several consecutive days, he drew exactly the same shape, each time with slight modifications, but without altering the main structure. It was clear that for him that figure held specific meaning, perhaps a kind of culmination within the process he had been tracking for months. The night everything changed. The house was unusually quiet. The boy turned on the receiver at the usual time and began slowly sweeping the frequencies. For several minutes, nothing different happened. However, when he stopped at a precise point in the spectrum, the static underwent a sudden alteration, a brief, irregular vibration, unlike any of the previous variations. It was a short, uneven change, but marked enough for the boy to react instantly. He took the pencil and drew the same ascending curve he had repeated so many days, but this time he added a segment he had never drawn before, a small vertical jump, clearly indicating a final increase in intensity. The researcher, seeing the drawing, sensed that something did not match the previous recordings, but he had no time to analyze it. Only hours later, the main European observatories issued an urgent communiqué reporting an unexpected phenomenon. 3I Atlas had experienced a slight acceleration in its motion, an increase that could not be linked to known gravitational forces or atmospheric effects. Experts were trying to understand the origin of the change, but initial estimates indicated the alteration had occurred right after a routine transmission experiment carried out by a European agency, a minor test, with no significant scientific intent. The temporal coincidence was extraordinary. The alteration recorded by the interstellar object had taken place in exactly the same interval the boy had been marking for weeks on his graphs. Upon careful review of the notebooks, it was confirmed that the peaks drawn with darker strokes corresponded precisely to the type of increase the observatories described as unexpected acceleration. That discovery plunged the researcher into absolute bewilderment. The boy's graphs did not merely anticipate the changes, they represented them with a clarity that he himself, even with access to instrumental data, had not managed to interpret so directly. The idea that the interstellar object had reacted to a human signal seemed improbable from every scientific viewpoint. Yet the notebook showed a concrete sequence linking the terrestrial transmission to the recorded acceleration. The conclusion was too disturbing to ignore. In the days that followed, the boy stopped recording new variations. He showed no further interest in turning on the receiver or reviewing his notebooks. He returned to activities typical of his age, as if the listening phase had naturally come to an end. The adults interpreted this change as a clear sign. For him, the process was complete, and there was nothing left to follow or analyze. Over time, relatives and the researcher re-examined the notebooks in greater detail and discovered something even more unsettling. On the final pages, right after the curve coinciding with the acceleration, the boy had drawn a simple symbol made of two parallel lines and a closing dot. There were no additional annotations, but the placement of that symbol seemed deliberate, as if it represented the definitive closure of the process or confirmation that the exchange had ended. The most disconcerting coincidence came a week later, when international media officially announced the speed variation of 3I Atlas. The news reverberated across Europe, but for the family it carried a completely different meaning. The researcher, notebooks in hand, could not help but reconsider everything he had observed over the past months. The sequences, the coincidences, the anticipations, no conventional explanation could encompass what the boy had recorded. That day, while the adults tried to grasp the true scope of the acceleration, the boy remained calm in his room, playing without apparent worry. He no longer showed interest in the receiver or the old graphs. His behavior radiated an unexpected serenity that contrasted with the tension filling the house. Seeing him like that, the researcher understood something he had avoided voicing until then. For the boy, the message was complete. There was nothing more to listen to or record. And most disturbing was the lingering sense that from the very beginning he had been aware that this outcome was part of a cycle the adults had only perceived when it was already ending. Although no one could fully interpret it, the facts were clear. The boy had detected signals before official instruments, marked intervals coinciding with human transmissions, and recorded an alteration that days later manifested in the trajectory of an interstellar object. For the adults, there remained the uncomfortable underlying question: if 3I Atlas had truly accelerated after a terrestrial transmission, what exactly had the boy captured during those nights? And above all, who had answered?